Welcome to the Bellwether College Consortium Summer Innovation Series. My name is Rose Martinez. I serve as the director for the consortium, a nationally respected and member-supported think tank made up of award-winning colleges, which include our recent Bellwether Award recipients and our Outstanding Dissertation Award honoree. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Elif Yücel to this BCC taping and to congratulate her on being named the BCC Outstanding Dissertation Award winner for 2025. Her dissertation titled What Happens When You're Free? Navigating the Nexus of Higher Education and Criminal Legal Reentry examines reentry programs and support for formerly incarcerated students on community college campuses and the role that these programs play in the reentry and higher education landscapes for this population. Before I delve into the interview with our esteemed guests, permit me to share more about the consortium and the ODA competition. For those of you who may not be aware of the consortium, BCC is charged with addressing critical issues facing community colleges through applied research and through the promotion and replication of best practices. We host the annual Bellwether Award competition for public community colleges in the United States and the U.S. territories. We receive numerous submissions, and after a stringent first round of evaluation, only 30 community colleges or 30 community college programs are invited to join the consortium and to compete in the final rigorous round, and only 3 are awarded the Bellwether Awardee. For those 30 finalists, they are given the title, or for those 30 community college programs, they are given the title Bellwether Finalist. Among the finalists, as I said, there are 3 Bellwether Award winners that are chosen, and they represent the highest scored program in one of the following categories. Those categories are workforce development, instructional programs and services, and planning, governance, and finance. That final round of the Bellwether Award competition takes place at what is called the Community College Futures Assembly, which is held in late February. We also host the BCC Outstanding Dissertation Award competition, which has grown tremendously in just a few short years. This award bestows recognition to a worthy individual whose doctoral dissertation makes a substantial contribution to the literature and/or practice of community college instruction, governance, or workforce development. The 2026 competition has begun, and we're receiving submissions now, and the deadline to apply is December 1st. Let me talk about the significance of the award. The winner of this award is nationally recognized via our Bellwether College Consortium social media channels. But in addition to that, and I think more importantly, we invite this person to present to our 30 community college teams and leaders who represent the Bellwether finalist each year of the competition. The Outstanding Dissertation Award competition is judged by a national jury of judges with expert knowledge in higher education research and specifically community college issues. Though that particular person receives complimentary registration and 2 days of accommodations at what will be this coming year, the St. Anthony Hotel in beautiful San Antonio. So if you are interested in applying, we would love to have your dissertation for consideration. Just to talk a little bit about the dates and deadlines, those are important to note. So let me go ahead and just briefly go over them now. First of all, the submission portal is open. I'm happy to announce we opened that in May. That portal will be open until December 1st. So if you are a candidate and will be defending your dissertation before December 1st or very soon or close to that date, you can apply as long as you have a successfully defended dissertation and complete the application process by December 1. The ODA winner is notified in January of 2026, And then we're delighted to say we invite you to the Community College Futures presentation or assembly, where you provide your presentation to a wonderful audience of community college practitioners. And so this coming year, our Futures Assembly will be held February 22nd through 24th at the St. Anthony Hotel in San Antonio. Visit our website at Bellwether College Consortium for more information. That is bellwethercollegeconsortium.com. All right, let's now celebrate our honoree. I'm excited to feature Dr. Yücel in our innovation series. And just to remind you, the purpose of this series is to inspire our community colleges across the nation to learn from important and exemplary research focused on community college issues. Let me give you a little bit of background on Dr. Yücel. Dr. Yücel is an Associate Learning and Evaluation Officer at the ECMC Foundation. She supports the Foundation's learning and evaluation efforts, which form the Foundation's grant-making and advance its commitment to sharing knowledge both internally and at the Foundation and externally with the field. Prior to joining the ECMC Foundation, Elif worked in higher education for over a decade, holding roles in college advising, student services, and prison education. Elif holds a PhD in urban education policy from the University of Southern California. She holds a master's in education and education policy and planning from the University of Texas at Austin, and a BA in Chinese from Trinity University. Again, congratulations on being named the 2025 Outstanding Dissertation Awardee. Let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. Welcome, Dr. Elif.
Thank you so much for having me here. Excited to talk with you about this topic.
Sure. Yes, we're excited to learn more. Let me begin by starting with, I think, a good general question to establish the landscape, and that is, what was the impetus for you studying community college reentry programs, and why were you drawn to this topic?
Yeah, so I think I've really been involved in like the prison education and also like criminal justice advocacy space for really over a decade now. And that's like working with incarcerated adults, incarcerated youth. And I think something that I noticed through my work in volunteering, but also throughout my research is that, well, and even in like public policy, in the public policy sphere, like there's just a lot of emphasis on like what happens inside the prison, and especially like as it relates to education. So a lot of support for helping students have access to college courses, to general education courses, for students getting their GEDs and the like, but there isn't really this sort of like dedicated effort to sustaining these educational pathways once they're released. And so that's something that drew me to this topic. Especially considering that, reentry in general, so the process of exiting incarceration and returning to one's community, it's so complex, it's such a complicated system, and you really have to have this large network of support. And, like so many people get out and they want to be able to continue their education that they started while they were incarcerated. And I think I saw the community colleges sort of, as this like key entry point to higher education, especially for formerly incarcerated students. Because they're open access, because they're designed to meet the needs of their communities. And so I think that's really what motivated me. My research has historically focused on equity issues in community colleges. And in general, I think I just wanted to learn more about these programs and sort of how they cultivate these necessary support systems for students and help them navigate higher education and reentry.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's such an understudied area, so I appreciate that. You've devoted so much of your time and effort in doing so. Can you talk a little bit about the barriers you observed most frequently that prevented formerly incarcerated students from persisting in and completing their education?
Yes, so many, unfortunately. I think, like I shared earlier, reentry is super challenging because you're, forced to navigate this different world than what you've been used to, right? Especially considering, people who may have been incarcerated for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and so on. And so when you get out, you're forced to navigate these different social norms than what you've been used to, different rules, different regulations. And at the same time, right, you have to get a job, you have to find a place to live, you need food, you need to meet these other basic needs that have, historically been provided for you in the prison or in the jail. And so I think what makes that process even more difficult than it already is the sort of the dragnet of like the legal constraints placed on formerly incarcerated people. So, facing barriers to employment discrimination, you have, restrictions on welfare access, you're sometimes disenfranchised from voting. You have to navigate the variety of parole and probation restrictions, just things that really make your daily life so challenging. And so like navigating all of those burdens is just really hard. And on top of that, right, if you think about going to school, it's hard to go to school when you don't have a place to live. It's hard to go to school when you can't afford to pay for your tuition, when you can't get a job, or when you may be discriminated against from, finding a job. So there are really just so many restrictions on your time, on your freedom, that like no other student group really faces those same restrictions. And so that just makes pursuing your education and completing it even more challenging. And I think that's, what makes these programs like so important is because they help students navigate this journey, both on the education side and both on the reentry side. And they provide sort of this like social safety net as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know that they need all that help, and hopefully wraparound services if possible through these programs. So I'm interested in learning more. What forms of institutional support do you think are most critical to sustaining reentry programs on community college campuses, and why? I know you kind of talked a little bit about what they need, so maybe this is addressing what they're getting.
I think probably most importantly, like having like leadership buy-in really at all levels is the most important form of institutional support. I think like any student affairs professional will probably say like, yeah, you have to have a space to meet, you have to have the funding to provide these key services. But if you don't have buy-in from the top, then like that sort of negates anything that comes after. So I think if like leadership and administrators really say, hey, this, serving these students is something that's a priority for us, this is something that's really important and that we value, then I think, others across campus will also, buy into that as well and can like see the value of it. And I think also maybe, create change across other community college campuses, because a lot of times, people follow what others are doing and best practices. And so I think having that sort of support from the top is really essential, especially because, there's just so much stigma associated with having a record or, being connected to the carceral system in any way. So these programs like really do a good job of helping dispel that. But again, if there is that buy-in, if there is that support from the top, that can really send a message that will trickle down to really like all different areas of campus, and can like reverberate across the institution. And that will help, institutionalize the support that these programs provide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is it possible for you to give an example, or can you remember something that maybe your research found in terms of an example of maybe coming from the top down? An example of that you remember that you could share?
I think without, naming names, of course, I think there are some institutions that do a good job of, being out there with the faculty and the students who are the faculty affiliates and the staff affiliates of these programs. So when I would say historically, my research has shown that these programs actually emerge more from like bottom up efforts from dedicated faculty and staff. But when they do emerge and then that leadership latches on sort of, and then they're coming to program meetings, they're showing up at board meetings and advocating for these programs, they're advocating for them to be included in the budget. I think that's again, without naming names, I think that's like some of the ways that the leadership does support and show up and puts their face to the program as well.
Yeah, no, that I appreciate that. It always helps to understand, okay, well, what does that buy-in look like?
Right.
Especially for these programs that, like I said, might not always get a light shined on them. So I appreciate that. Can you talk about, well, I guess the question would be, are there aspects of reentry programs you studied that you feel are under-recognized or misunderstood in the value to certain student populations?
I mean, I think in general these programs are under-recognized. They're doing such important work, but they don't have like this historical buy-in, or like they're not built into the institutional budgets, and everyone's fighting for funding, obviously, especially now. So like having that sort of institutionalized form of support is really important. So I think in general these programs are probably under-recognized. But I would say also just like the staff, like the work that the staff do for these programs. They're like I think I just shared, they typically emerge from these like bottom up initiatives. So staff are, usually going above and beyond their normal roles and responsibilities, which are oftentimes separate from the work that they do from these programs. They're giving, their emotional labor, their mental labor, their physical labor in supporting students in the programs, and making sure that all the students involved have, everything that they need to be successful. I think they're just like, true advocates for those who have been impacted by the legal system. And it's not, just the students that they're working with, it's the communities that they come from, it's their families as well. So they're really advocating for the community as a whole, the formerly incarcerated community, the system impacted community, those who are incarcerated. And I think, yeah, there's just like this level of care and knowledge that is required to be able to successfully support these students. And I think, that the staff who work for these programs, whether it's volunteering, whether they're, actually paid to do this work, they just really bring this like love and joy. And I think in general, just a genuine care for the communities that they work with. So I think, yeah, that the role that staff play, I think, is probably super under-recognized. But I think so something else probably is that maybe it's not that it's like misunderstood, but probably not fully realized in its full potential, maybe, is that these programs really have a responsibility in helping repair the harm that has been done by the carceral system. If you're working on serving, if you're dedicated to serving these students, there's a responsibility that comes with that, and sort of working to like eradicate sort of the punitive and carceral structures and policies that may exist on campus. So it's not just about helping students get an education. It's not just about helping students get a job. It also has to be sort of about this like larger political and social transformation. So like, how can we all collectively organize ourselves and implement this program in a way that will inspire others to sort of envision a different world of like what's possible. So I think that's something that these programs do also a good job of, that is under-recognized, but also not fully realized as well.
Yeah, I see that. So you're engaging them obviously on the educational side, but also socializing them into a larger environment that now is quote unquote accepting them, versus them maybe not feeling like they were a part of the system, of the community in general. So what a great role for a college to play. And I understand what you're saying. It's like you need to be able to communicate and listen, and really kind of, that we always talk about meet students where they are. Well, this is a totally different student, and it's very important that we do meet them where they are, because there's just so much that they're having to reintroduce themselves to. Maybe that's one of the, I don't know if that's the correct word, but kind of what comes to mind. And so what an important program in our society to help these students be a part of something that they may not have been thinking they were a part of before, given their circumstances. So no, I think that's a really important key points that you've mentioned. Let's talk about partnerships. What partnerships, either on or off campus, have been most impactful for reentry efforts that you've studied? And how would community colleges better embrace or support those networks?
Yes, this was one of the key findings in papers of my dissertation, the sort of the resources that these programs broker, and the connections that are required to broker these resources. So on this slide, you can kind of see all the different types of supports provided. And in my dissertation, I show that these programs really serve as these the key resource brokers for formerly incarcerated students. So they're connecting them to various supports, both on and off campus, as it relates to their education and reentry journeys. and how they broker these resources is through the direct transfer of resources, meaning that the program provides it directly to students, or it's through the indirect transfer via, referrals to other campus or other departments on campus, or it's, referrals to off-campus organizations, and different support systems that they can find in the community. So on-campus partnerships found that, these coordinated efforts with student services programs is super helpful and important. So, Veterans Affairs Office, DSPS, EOPS, those programs have like really close relationships with these, the programs have really close relationships with these departments on campus because they're regularly working with them to get the support that they need for their students. And, oftentimes formerly incarcerated students have these intersecting identities with the departments that these programs, with the students that these departments serve. So that's like really important. And then I would say like the admissions and, financial aid office, career services, those are obviously super important for all students, but especially for formerly incarcerated students. So programs really work with those departments to help make sure, students are enrolled on time, that they're getting the financial aid, that they're, able to register for classes. Oftentimes they can get them priority registration. And so really they're working with those different areas to ensure that, students are receiving adequate and timely support as well. And then off campus, ties with like legal advocacy or criminal justice organizations were really important. So I think one of the most, tangibly impactful things that programs can do is help students expunge their record. And so a lot of programs were really prioritizing this and working with like pro bono or legal advocacy organizations that did this pro bono work to help them expunge their record so that, they would have fewer restrictions on their freedom so that they could access some of the same things that, their peers might be able to. And I think in addition to those advocacy organizations, programs also tried to foster relationships with like the local DA office, probation and parole offices, so that they could have these sort of strong relationships with them, so that if any issues arise in like the student's court case or anything else, they can help mediate more easily and also be sort of like a voucher for that student as well. I think in general, how colleges can help support programs like and help foster these connections is again like providing that like sort of or emphasizing the importance of the value of these programs that they bring to their campus, setting that sort of value statement and buy-in at the leadership level, but then also, I think just more training and PD, I think for community college staff, again, like they have unique needs that other students aren't facing. And so like the different policies that affect them on campus, different policies that affect them off campus. And I think whether they know it or not, staff are working with formerly incarcerated students. And so like the more aware that they are of students' needs, I think the better that they can just serve their students. And the deeper that these sort of like cross-campus partnerships are, the greater the awareness, the greater the empathy, and just general consideration can be in serving these students.
Yeah, no, thank you for laying all that out and the resource types, and it really helps hone in on all the ways a college can help, and if they're not doing some of these things, maybe where they could situate them. So I appreciate that. How do you, or if you're so bold, how should community colleges support the mental health and emotional resilience of their students? And if you have any no cost or low cost examples, that's always important for our colleges to consider. But what examples would you provide, both for cost, maybe not cost, that are worth the investment?
Sure. So I will preface that, I'm a researcher, I'm an education professional, but I'm not a healthcare professional or expert in that area. So just prefacing my answer with that. But I think what I have seen through my research is that it's obvious, I think probably that, there's so much trauma that comes with being incarcerated that it causes, that it also exacerbates. And so like addressing that is really no small task. And so it's really important for colleges to sort of to know, the trauma that comes with that, and sort of have appropriate structures in place. So obviously, like healthcare professionals should be consulted in devising care plans for students, in devising and thinking about outreach services for students. But what I can share from my research is that a lot of, like, I think the slide just showed previously, like, and as I shared, programs have these connections with mental health services, with health services on campus. They know the trauma that students have endured, and so they're working with health services to devise like weekly or monthly support groups for formerly incarcerated men, for formerly incarcerated women, because people have different experiences. And so they're having these support groups where people can, engage with one another and with people who, have specifically gone through what they've gone through. And those types of interactions and meetings can really help create like a safe environment for people to share what they're feeling, and also receive, the appropriate support from like a licensed professional. So that's something that I've seen that programs have done. But I think in general, these programs are really providing a safe and nurturing, a social environment for people to, again, interact with people or other students who have gone through what they have gone through. So together, collectively, the program advisors, program staff, the students, they all create this supportive learning environment where, again, people can learn from one another, and share what they've gone through, and they can really just feel safe and sort of understood, that they know that other people have gone through the same things, so that they feel more comfortable sharing. And those types of environments that the programs create are often in contrast to, a lot of their previous experiences, whether it was through incarceration, whether it was their previous educational experiences. So having those sort of safe spaces for students to be involved in is also really important for students' mental health. Because if they didn't have that, then, they would feel much more alone and isolated. And incarceration is such a isolating and physically, mentally, socially isolating experience. So having a supportive environment to come out to is really important. I think just as I guess it would be a cost thing. Having just more staff hired to work directly with these programs, I think, is obviously important, because they're unique. Their needs are unique and very specialized. Having people who are, explicitly dedicated to working with them versus, the general community college population at large, I think would be really important, because again, they're trained to know what these students have gone through. They're trained to be able to care for them in the different ways that they need support. So I think obviously, like, having a mental health care professional or a social worker who was hired specifically to work with these programs would be really helpful. And I think, even more so, hiring a formerly incarcerated person to work in those positions, again, because they have gone through that themselves, would be very impactful.
Yeah, no, thank you for those examples. Exactly right. I mean, a lot of that is more the human resources side of it, to make sure those connections are there, and to educate them on maybe where they could get even more connections outside the community college bubble, so to speak. I'm going to skip to our last question, because I think you responded pretty well to the one that I had coming up. Well, let's talk about if all community colleges could implement a reentry program, what would be the 3 important tips to share with them based on your research findings?
I think I shared a little bit of this earlier. I think the most important is that there's a responsibility that comes with serving these students. I think colleges, the administrators, the leadership, practitioners all on campus have to be genuinely invested in supporting them. It can't really just be like the symbolic or altruistic gesture. They have to be materially and emotionally committed to serving students' journeys, and it can't be done like halfway. So I think like the programs are more successful, obviously, when they have, again, like that verbal financial commitment from leadership, from the college, from the district, from the state even. Think they can really set an example for other institutions to follow. And so with that responsibility, comes that they have to also be genuinely committed to repairing the inequities and sort of reducing the barriers that exist for formerly incarcerated individuals. And I think that really has to extend beyond the classroom. So like building those cross-campus connections, building those community ties is really important, as is like implementing the, required PD and training required to do that work. But I think colleges really have to have like long-term plans to create this change on campus, and think about how it might extend beyond the campus as well. I think with that, as I shared in the different types of partnerships that the colleges foster, it really can't be like a siloed effort from the program. It has to be across the entire campus. Everyone has to be committed to serving these students, and it can't just be like isolated in that, that one group. So maybe that means like rethinking the different policies that affect the students on campus. Maybe that means thinking about how, campus police works with students, like just thinking about all the ways that students are affected by the different, policies and procedures on campus, and trying to make it more of a restorative and accessible space for everyone. Okay, tip 2, let's see. I think I shared earlier about this. I think the social aspect of these programs is super important. So being able to connect with students, again, that have gone through something that you've gone through is really important. And I think in some ways it's like a form of legitimization for these students, that, they're not alone, that their needs are valued, that they're seen and they're understood. And so through connecting with one another, the students and staff really create community with themselves, but also with the broader campus. And so I think something that's really important for them to do is that to really like help break down the stigma that's, associated with being formerly incarcerated. I think collectively these actions and sort of group dynamics like really empower students to be advocates for themselves, for their peers, and for their community, and to just, establish that like they don't actually have anything to be ashamed of. And I think through unlearning that self-stigmatization of having a record or like being incarcerated, students are still advocating for themselves, for other students on campus, for the formerly incarcerated the formerly incarcerated community in general. And they're all educating one another about the criminal justice system, and sort of unpacking the stereotypes and the mindsets about who is and who is not deserving of opportunities and services. I think, just incarceration in general, it's just such, like I said, like an isolating experience. Aftermath is also just as extremely lonely and isolating. So it's really important for programs to actively counter that. Yeah.
All right. I had one last question. As you were talking, do you find in your study that that a particular entity, whether it was on the community college side or on the prison or detention center side, that made a difference in the success of the program? So for instance, maybe a juvenile detention center saying, we'd like to set up a program with the community college for once these students leave us, or versus the community college saying, oh, well, this prison is near us. Maybe we should begin to have a communication with them because we care about that community as well. Did you see any distinction, or what, or did you see maybe a specific path or model that seemed to be doing better because of an interest on one side or both sides? Can you share more?
Yeah, I think one thing that I found through my research is that there's different institutionalization levels of these programs. So like maybe they start out as these campus clubs, and they're not an official program. They're just, students meeting together. They have a faculty advisor. They're still doing the same work, but they don't sort of have that institutionalized form of support. And then you have on the other end sort of these like heavily institutionalized programs. They have funding baked into the district budget. They have funding baked in from the college budget. And they like a lot of, or not everyone on campus obviously knows about them, but they have a presence on campus. And so I think more successful, well, I don't want to say more successful, but it's obviously easier to do the work when you have when you have genuine commitment from your campus to support the students. And again, it's not just that symbolic gesture where like, oh yeah, we want to support formerly incarcerated students, but we're not actually implementing the policies and sort of services that the students need to be successful. So I think those programs do probably have an easier job in supporting their students, perhaps. But then on the other end, I think you're talking about like, are there any like connections that maybe from the carceral facilities and the institutions? And I think something that's important and that staff have shared that is important is having that sort of educational continuity from what happens inside to being able to continue your education. There are a lot of colleges that, and when I say colleges, I mean like nationwide, not as it relates to my research. There are a lot of colleges that have they teach inside, but they don't have any sort of support system or transition program or plan for when students get out. Or sometimes they offer a program inside, but when students get out, maybe the admission policies of their campus might discriminate against them in the application process. So having the continuity of support for the students inside being able to continue their education when they get out. And I think in my research specifically, the staff have really prioritized teaching inside, while also, again, going when they know students are going to be released, they're meeting with the probation department to ensure that the students coming out have somewhere to go, that they have the services, that they know the community college is this place where they can come and land and continue their education. Or if they didn't get access to courses inside, that they can come pursue their education at the college, and these are the different services that will be provided to them.
Yeah. Almost like providing a guided pathway for formerly incarcerated individuals. So yeah, no, thank you for that. No, it really kind of makes the connection, right, in terms of where it starts, what's best. And it sounds like a lot of this is also student generated. Like they're looking for someone like them, and then they're looking for that support on the campus once they get there. So good for them, and hopefully the colleges are responsive to their needs and start with that first basic step. It's just providing a support program for them. But I appreciate your time, and it's been so interesting to learn about the research. And obviously our judges thought it was the dissertation of the many that were submitted. So I congratulate you again, and I want to thank you again for sharing your insights. Best wishes for continued success in your professional career. And to our audience members, thank you for being with us today. Consider applying for the Outstanding Dissertation Award. The portal's open, like I said, and can be accessed at bellwethercollegeconsortium.com under the under the Dissertation Award tab. Thank you again, Dr. Usel, for sharing more about the award-winning program. And this concludes our innovation session. Thank you.
Thank you.